Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to Concordia University's fourth space, and thank you for joining us for today's event, Recompose, day 2, blurring the bifurcation between materialistic states. This is part of the Critical Mediation pop-up Expo, and to help situate you, we are streaming to YouTube, we are live from fourth space, and we are located here on unceded Indigenous lands in Chichage, Montreal. Here at Fourth Space, we work with our university community to help mobilize knowledge. We co-create daily activities that examine research questions, projects, things in development across the university. We're also running today's event as a live stream Zoom meeting, so any of you joining us there, we welcome your comments and questions. Just pop those into the chat. Those of you here in the space, well, we're going to be touring around and looking at these projects closely, so you can ask questions as we do that. Okay, it's now my pleasure to pass things over for a little introduction to one of the members of the Critical Mediation team. Zoe, over to you.
Hi, everyone. So we're really excited to gather here today to show you the work that we've been working on in our critical materiality class. We have a good combination of both graduate and undergraduate students, so I really feel like we got to see a wide range of result and experience. We'd also like to really thank the fourth space, including Doug and Birdie, for graciously allowing us to do our show here. This has been like a long running thing where the students of the critical materiality class are able to display their work, and it's really helpful as like emerging artists to be able to have a installation on our CV, so we're really thankful for that. And we also want to thank our Prof. Brees for being here. Throughout our journey, we all worked on a really wide range of projects, which you can see both yesterday and today. And yeah, I don't think a lot of us would have been able to get any result without his expertise and aid. So thank you so much. Can I bring everyone over to my project? I suppose I'll begin.
Yeah, so first we'll go over to Zoe. Thank you.
All right, so so this is my project. It's called Troubled Waters. It is my attempt to basically create some sort of tangible idea that I can continue working on that's related to the research that I've been doing personally for the last few years. So yeah, a lot of my work for the last 2 years has been focused on bodies of water. Humans have a really long-term relationship with water. We've used it to colonize, we've used it to industrialize, we've used it to innovate, and later, obviously, we've globalized using it. We can see in our own river the boats going down with all the industrial stuff on it. So I think it's a great tangible starting point to talk about interdependence. It kind of acts like a connector. It flows from one place to the next. And it serves as a messenger from where it came. And I also believe that we are like kind of watery bodies ourselves because we're this biological simile of like lakes and rivers on a more conceptual understanding. But yeah, I think that learning about water, writing about water, reading about water really serves to kind of break down this idea of like the all-powerful man and create solidarity amongst watery beings and hopefully, by extension, beings in general. So in Montreal, we find ourselves at like the epicenter of an anthropogenic landscape. We have our own St. Lawrence waterway, and below the surface, consequences of ongoing ignored interdependence are playing out in like a dramatic fashion. Decades-long research is kind of starting to show the impact of receiving the majority of effluent from like industrialized North America. It's our one major waterway that takes all of the treated water and brings it down to the ocean. But yeah, from studies both the presence and like impact of SSRIs on fish that are treated, like are in primary treated water, and also looking at the mortality rates in belugas with like 27% having cancer and stuff, it kind of shows the devastating impact that human activity has on our waterway. And obviously, more unsurprisingly, our call to action as a people so far has been much more the way in which that these stats are mirrored in our human population. So for example, for those living around the estuary where the belugas feed, live, die, where we found those super high rates of cancer, the presence is mirrored in the people who live there. So their rate of cancer is the highest in Quebec and Canada. And that is due to the fact that there's aluminum smelters along the river. So this is kind of where I'm starting from. I'm looking at how like working with water, talking about water can kind of help us decenter ourselves and create this like solidarity amongst beings and make us care a little bit more about how we treat the waterway because it impacts us in the long run. So for this class specifically, I feel like my approach was really to try and change my methodology. I often find myself getting very stuck in like big picture ideas. Like I really have this idea that I'll go from start to finish and then I'll create a project and then there'll be punctuation at the end and done. But obviously that isn't really the case for a class like this. There's a lot of experimentation. So my project went through a lot of different states before I ended up on this. I tried originally taking photos of the movement of water on paper. I tried to reproduce the elusive and capturing effects of water. But finally, I kind of settled onto just focusing on the ontology of water itself, and that is like, how do we define it? How is it relating to other things in its sphere? How does that change as time goes on? And also its agency. So like, how can water impact the things around it? So for example, like, how can we see that it is fluid, dynamic, and changing? So in the end, I created, to do this, a light-sensitive bioplastic. I did a few methods. First, I did isopropyl. I don't know if you guys want to come look. First, I did isopropyl alcohol, which is like really a basic way of going about it, but I thought it was probably smart to start easy. From top to bottom, you can kind of see how I've moved through iterations and experimentations and finally like settled on the bottom one. But what I really liked about the isopropyl alcohol is that it really captures the drying of the material on the glass. The glass is also interesting in itself because I decided to create sea glass. I think it is a really good, like, I guess I'll use the word encounter as we've learned in class, that kind of shows how time and water can like shape a human man-made material that we often think of as waste. To do this, I went and I got sand from the riverbed and water from the river, and I placed them and broken glass, which I salvaged from microwave, the plates that go on the base of a microwave, I'm sure we're all familiar. And I put those in the rock tumbler for a few weeks to kind of simulate the way in which the water would erode and shape this like man-made material. So I started with the isopropyl. I really like the way it dried down. It really captures the drying, and you can even see on some of them that there's interactions between my fingers and the water, which I find very interesting. I then moved on to doing some plant-based ones. These are cornstarch and glycerin-based. They go on very thick. I think near the end I was kind of getting it there, but this too is a very interesting way to think about how it dries down, and you can kind of see the movements and the retraction of the water as it goes through its different states. And then the animal-based ones are probably the ones I had the most success with, although I think all of them give interesting results for different things. That's gelatin-based, as you can expect. I think by the time I got to my last one, I achieved some clarity, but yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. I don't know if there's much more to cover. You guys can feel free to like pick up and really like scratch at these if you want to see the durability, because that's one of the things that impressed me the most. In terms of sustainability, this project, I would say somehow I could make it more sustainable. I have ideas of doing more experiments in some of my earlier experiments where I used spirulina to create an anthotype, if that makes sense to you, like a plant-based pigment light-sensitive thing, but it was very hard to get the concentration right, and it just wasn't going great. But I thought that would be really cool. It would completely dissolve into nothing. In terms of like how these would degrade in a natural place, the only thing I would be concerned about is that one of the light-sensitive chemicals I use, if I were to wash maybe 1,000 times of these into an actual river, it would probably have an impact on the well-being of the ecosystem there. But I don't really see myself ever washing industrial levels of this. And the rest should just wash away. The pigment that gives it blue actually breaks down into iron. It can like help enrich the soil. So yeah, I think after this, I would like to try doing more. These are some later experiments I had. We can pass these around if you guys want. Taking it directly onto bioplastic, I thought it would be cool to create, I thought it would be cool to create something that could kind of float atop the water. But I've had little success. As you can see, like we definitely lose detail in the imagery. But yeah, I think it's a good starting point. I can definitely see where this project will bring me next. I have ideas about trying to create light-sensitive mud. I have ideas about trying to create light-sensitive like ice and stuff. And I think, yeah, I'm really grateful for the way that this class kind of forced me to use a bioplastic, because initially I really tried to avoid it, and here I am with a bioplastic project, and I get it now. I've been bitten by the bioplastic bug, I understand. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I want to say, and I don't think so. So if anybody has any questions.
We can go to questions. I'll pass this microphone around. And also, if anyone's joining us on Zoom or YouTube and they have questions, type them into the chats and we can read them out. So
You guys can feel free to like really touch and scratch these though. Like that is what I was most impressed by, is the durability. Like I think you could run a car over it.
You mentioned you used microwave like plates as the glass. I was just wondering why you chose them. It was like an accessibility thing. Because on the other hand, I also wanted to say that they kind of look like coral.
Oh
They're giving coral. I don't know, like some of them have like that bubbly texture. Reminds me of coral.
No, I totally agree. So initially I knew that I would need to get a large amount of glass, and I kind of know that although we think of glass as like a super reusable, repurposable, eco-friendly item because it's not plastic, there's a lot of glass that goes unused. I'm sure we've all been to a thrift store as art students. But there's so much glass, and I decided to use microwave plates, one, because they're quite thick, and I knew that that would kind of allow me to have a good break, because I'd never really smashed glass before. Like, it's just not something I did that much of. But I knew it would allow me to have a clean break, and I knew there was a lot of people with microwaves that they throw out. So I was kind of like, okay, cool. In the end though, I think mentioning this, that is one of the challenges I had in this project, is that microwave plates are not even because they want spills to pool, and that drove me crazy because everything needs to be so even, it needs to dry down so even to get any semblance of an image. You can kind of see on the last ones that took forever to dry down, that they're the flattest of them all. I think that's pretty much it. But I think in the future, maybe I won't use microwave plates.
any other questions?
Hello, oui. Thank you, Zoe, for your project. I think it's we have like beautiful pieces here, and I'm actually wondering now that you've developed quite a process that you master. So you get the methodology, you get the concepts, and then what do you envision in terms of representation? Because what we see here, to me, like at first I was like, oh, it's a bit kitsch, the imagery, and at the end I was like, but at the same time it kind of like there's something like fossils, and there's this kind of aesthetic where these fragments could have been found somewhere, and then that tells a story. Also, the cutters, that looks like cyanotypes a little bit. There's this kind of, we don't know whether it's a picture or it's engraved. So what do you envision doing with this? Like, I mean, like framing it, making an installation out of it, because so far the protocol is very like, we see the methodology, but still there's a lot of aesthetic into it. So how would you transform it into something that goes beyond this setup?
I think that that's a really good question. It is the question I found myself asking in the last like 2 weeks of kind of finalizing, as you say, the methodology and like how I go about doing it. Because once I got it down, I was like, wait a second, like this could really be something that I work with like for a long time. In terms of these pieces specifically, I view it more as like an exercise in a much bigger picture. Like I definitely think this is something I'll be revisiting like next week. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, I would really love to be able to move forward with these and print on more watery things. I would love to be able to infuse them with bubbles, as we learned from the presentation yesterday, is possible, and see if I could get them to float on bodies of water. I would love to, I think for these, it would be interesting to, like you say, find them around, although I didn't really have the time for this. But yeah, I think there's a lot of ways I could do it. I'm not really sure yet how to create something that I believe is like installation worthy on its own that doesn't just cover the experimentation though. Like, I think I'm gonna have to work more on like my research if I'm being honest. But yeah, that's what I think, to be honest. I think that it's cool on the light box. It could be cool like as something that somebody carries around. Like I said, they're really durable, so I'm pretty sure you could throw one in your pocket for months at a time, it would survive. But yeah, I'd maybe building on the idea that it's like a keepsake. I feel like everybody goes to the ocean and leaves with like the piece of glass. They're like, oh my God, like I found this piece of glass. And it's like, you guys don't get it. Like it's so special. And it has obviously the location, memories, and whatever attached to it. So perhaps something like that where I create an extensive amount or something and people can walk around on like a ground that's illuminated and pick up pieces as they want and go. And at one point the room would be empty. Something like that. I have a lot of thoughts, but that's almost my crux because like I don't know where to. Yeah, but I'm pretty pleased. I think I've given myself like a solid starting point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, since I know that you like very much reading, I would suggest you to go for Giuliana Bruno because there's a lot about surfaces theories that you'll be interested in. And there's a super book that's called Surfaces Matters from Young-Sung Lee with the introduction made by Giuliana Bruno. And I also think that Gaston Bachelard would be a great reading for you, Water and Dreams, as well as Lia Giraud that we talked about in class.
The one who does the work with the water itself. I've seen this, yes.
No, this one is with the phytobacterias that she's copying, she's mimicking the process of cyanotypes, but with phytobacterias.
Okay, sweet. Oh, I tried it. My result was bad. Maybe I'll have to send her an email or something. But yeah, I'll check that out. Thank you so much. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Zoe. Okay, we're moving along. Val, are you next?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay, I could just hold this, I guess. Are we ready? So these are the products of my investigation into penness, and much like Plato's idea of chairness, you might want to come a little closer because this is small and there's a lot of tiny details here. So much like the ideas of Plato's chairness, our conceptions of everyday things is sort of suspended between what's real and what's in front of us and the ideas that we have about them. And for me, the tools that I use and myself sort of co-create each other. As a designer, and usually I would get this urge to do something differently, and that to me means to design. And so this design investigation reconciles my industrial design skill set and the curiosity of critical design to create a collection of spinnable pens that are reimagined to live in a world that's where, say, play and social harmony is more important than productivity. And so this design actually gives agency to the pen as a tool to make marks not only on the paper but onto each other as they sort of collide around the walls and into each other. And so that they have their own life, they do their own images, the things that they create has its own temporality to it. And so with these, I invite you to think of functional objects differently, because if tools and humans do create each other, then for me, it would be a better place to, if we live with objects that play and hang out, So that sort of feeling. So this is my project. I call it Friends. So if you come even closer, I would. I only have one hand right now, but could you actually hold this to my mouth so that not too close? So I'm gonna do a little demo, I guess. Well, firstly, these are pens because they have a drawing tip. This is a refillable tip. This is a ready-made part, which goes into a copper collet, and then it goes into a seal housing. And then you can make marks like that, but then you can also make marks like that. And as you can see, the people who has already been here has made a lot of really interesting Uzumaki's, spiralings. And some were just, trying the pen out. So you get a good sense of, you get a good heat map of what's going on here. The other thing that's I want to mention about this one is that the finishing, steel, it doesn't usually come in this color. So this was actually finished using, so there, it gave up. But this was actually finished using the shavings that came from it. So after this was done, after each of this was turned on a lathe, it had a lot of metal chips. It had a lot of steel chips like this. And this was, each of these, without the inner parts, the inner components, of course, goes into a sort of bath of these steel chips, and then they get heated in order to give it this particular brown color. And some of the limitations of the shops and of the time was to achieve the color that I had wanted in the beginning, which I don't know if you can capture that, but it has that blue, and this is called steel, this is called heat bluing. With a little bit more time and with a little bit more heat, and perhaps a better setup, it will achieve a kind of blue that is like this. This was the blue that I had in the beginning, that I had in mind for this finish. So some other limitations is you're trying to capture that sound. It'll be cool if it makes sounds too, right? So there, that's my project. It's called Friends. Thank you.
I can pass this microphone to anyone who has any questions.
Okay.
I remember the first prototypes, you have another idea in mind where you're using like different material. So that was just for the prototype, or you just changed the material at the end because it was like proper use of the metal?
You mean the prototype that I had in pink?
Yeah.
That was made from clay. I tried spinning with that one, didn't spin very well. I mean, it was a really soft material. So that was supposed to be a stand-in for, that was kind of like a form-finding process for going with steel. And then after that, I also made a similar version of that, the next prototype of that in steel. Mm-hmm. But that didn't spin because it didn't have the right formula. Mm-hmm. Of the form in order to make it spin. One of the secrets, or like one of the technique or one of the form ratios that I found is that the what is 2R? What is 2 radius? Diameter. Okay, yeah, thank you. So the diameter has to be sort of close to the height to this part in order for it to spin nicely. Otherwise, like if you have a a taller cone or taller cylindrical form, then you might need like an actual, like an actual string to you need a lot of force in order to make those spins. So you've seen those like wooden tops that are like long like this, but usually you need a lot of force for that, and you can't really use your fingers. So this is what I found also in the process of making, which is, I guess I found trade secrets to
Thank you.
to making tops. Oh. Thanks for the question.
Okay, so I know the finalized product, you made them like very tiny, and it seems like you've already found and finalized a shape that you're happy with. Do you see yourself experimenting with more scales by any chance? Like working with maybe perhaps bigger forms, or I'm not entirely sure, but I feel like it could be a fun way to kind of explore this whole process. I'm not sure if that makes sense as a question.
So different form factors.
Different forms, or perhaps even playing with the scales or bigger scales for your design piece.
Yeah, so that would be an interesting, as I was telling Please earlier, we were thinking about, now that it spins, so the first generation of this is doing well now. I'm wondering, what can I do to make it more outs, to make it even more alternative, and even experimenting in scale, experimenting in different ratios of the parts, and perhaps maybe a different way to spin it.
Yeah.
Maybe with different materials, and maybe with different inks. And I know that some people were kind of excited about having a red color, but I couldn't find that part on Amazon. There you go. You found me.
Yeah, perhaps actually working maybe with 3D printing could also be a possibility to kind of play with that ratio aspect. I think that could be really fun. Plus, I see that weight kind of has an impact on how those traces are being formed. I think that could be a possibility to explore as well.
Yeah, totally. One of the things that one of the crucial factors for these is that its weight, its weight really decides how long it's spinning. The smaller, some of the smaller spinning tops, they require less force, but they don't spin very long. And so 3D printing is possible, I think, but it may need pretty precise. You might have to be pretty precise in the way it's printed in order for it to be very concentric and have all of that weight distributed equally.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, thanks for the.
Of course.
Thank you, Val. That was a very relaxing presentation, I must say. I actually disagree with the fact that 3D printing should intervene in this process. I have a critique that's also with dinosaurs in design say, hey, less is more, right? So there's very less here. And I think it's a very beautiful object as well. I think it has a lot of weight because it's made of metal. We give away most of our pens, most of our stuff because it doesn't have neither an emotional weight or a real material weight. So this actually costs a lot of metal. That's a big cost to make such an object. But I guess that it doesn't fail in its mission because this is the kind of object that you might want to keep with yourself and that you might be able to transmit over time because this is metal and this is very durable in a way. It's very sustainable. So I think that's something that works a lot. And congratulations for the object. I think it's very well polished and you solved the engineering problem as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about the frame now? and the support and the surface, because it's not just a matter of the object, but also what goes over there.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's the one thing I didn't talk about. Well, for these pens, they needed a surface to work on, and so I wanted to create a sort of playground for them, I guess. So they're, besides from the height dimensions, the consideration of heights that allows them to sort of just be there and have create some sort of a collision course for these to collide on top of each other, but also at the same time, like now that you've seen this, whatever that's made here is kind of like an action painting, right? The marks has been made, it's it leaves trace of what's been created, and also frames that experience versus whatever's outside. So yeah, so that was my consideration to it. I wanted to make something that's minimal and that's very unobtrusive, an unobtrusive framing for these guys. So I think MDF. This is MDF, and had it been for wood, I think that would have been a little bit distracting, I believe. So yeah. If I was to improve this, maybe I could have made it concave.
Or convex. I don't.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. Is it concave? Yeah, there you go.
No one ever knows.
That would fit the theme.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, because you were a bit frustrated by the inertia, because the spin is too perfect now. You did your job too well, so.
Like it would spin at one spot, and I would like them to go into the center. Mm-hmm. So that's something else I want to consider. And I've seen if you've seen videos of Beyblades, once they start spinning in the same direction and they start hitting each other in the center, they start to propel each other and help each other spin.
That's a good reference.
No.
I'm wondering if the base, I think right now it's a paper at the bottom.
Yeah.
If you had planned to maybe change them, display them, or the fun of it is that it keeps on accumulating all the time.
Oh, totally. This was going on my wall.
Okay.
And you will have to sign your name here.
No, but I think it's cool if
Contributed.
in the context of an exhibition, it's exhibited, people play with it, you restart the process and you hang it on the wall. So as long as it stays exposed, you have more and more,
Yeah.
you can change the base,
So
have a
these-
Beyblade.
That's right. So these create arts now.
Mm-hmm.
I should call this artists.
And also, you were talking about them colliding with each other and marking each other and marking the sides. And for this, I would see a ring of graphite or lead or poison or whatever.
That would be cool. Yeah.
So also you get a different kind of marking when they stop and collide with the floor from the side. I think it would be very nice also.
Thank you. Yeah.
So when I looked at the work, it initially, I don't know if everyone's familiar, but it really reminds me of Daniel Etoch's work. I don't know if you know who that is, but he investigates how the ink from markers and stuff, when sitting on paper, expands over time, and it kind of reminds me of your project a little bit, in terms of the themes. So that's the first thing I want to say. I really enjoy it. Second, the other thing it brought to mind was, I'm sure we've all taken a high school physics class where we are forced to do a ticker tape car to see the velocity of a car moving. And I kind of think that your project achieves the same thing, where it's like really physically tracking like a happening on paper. And I'm wondering if you're thinking of other projects past this that have to do with the way a pen interacts with paper and the way that humans are kind of the élément déclencheur, is that an okay word? Like the trigger, I guess, to like start. Oh wait, you're not French. Yeah, the trigger, sorry. The trigger to start an interaction and lead to a result, and how it's like a collaborative thing. I'm wondering if you are just gonna stick to your Beyblade-esque method, or if you're thinking of trying other stuff.
Well, I the other day, well, I talked to Max the other day, and there was this other project, I believe. I don't know if it was the same artist, but also with the balloon, with the charcoal, with the graphite, that uses room air pressure in order to change its course of movement. So, and I think that's the thing that distinguish this one from the other one, is that this one, it has more of like a direct, the interactivity with this is more direct. Like you have to hold it, and it leaves. You have to do something with it. It's a tool rather than being something that is like far away. And so that's a really interesting suggestion. Perhaps I could look into, seeing how, because the project starts with mark making, and it also starts with thinking about how to transform a tool into something that has more of an agency. So perhaps I could look into some sort of future to think of this not as just spinning, but also doing different kind of motions, which I can't ideate right now on the spot.
Fair.
But thank you for your critique.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Does anybody else have a question? Oh.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone. How about now? Oh, there we go. I think the idea was to take a pause. We're gonna go ahead. All right, that sounds good to me. How far you are gonna go? That's good.
Hello everyone, thank you for being here. My name is Nilüfer Karimi, and I am really excited to present my project here. This project actually means a lot to me because it connects two things that I am really care about, my heritage and sustainability. This project inspired by something from my childhood in Iran, pigeon towers. These structures were made centuries ago, and their functional was to house pigeons. I really like to bring that and combine it with a new material like mycelium. But they were not just the house for pigeons, but they had an environmental purpose. The droppings were collected and used as a fertilizer for farming, and they were a great example of architecture working hand in hand with nature. When I started this project, I kept asking how can I bring the same spirit of sustainability into today's world. That's where mycelium comes in, a living biodegradable materials that grows, evolve just like nature intended. This work is my own way of imagination, that connects past with a material that speaks to the future. Let me talk more about these pigeon towers because they are fascinating. They are tall, cylindrical structure made out of bricks with small alcoves inside. Pigeons could nest. What is amazing here is that they were not built just for pigeons, but also for the land and people who needed it. Unlike brick or stones, mycelium is a kind of material that grows, adapts, and eventually decomposes back to the earth. I formed the mycelium in a cylindrical shape here to blend the past with the new. For me, this is not just a sculpture, it's a way of showing how cultural heritage can inspire sustainable design. First, I try to use some waste for my mold, but because the mycelium is a kind of living material, they are very sensitive to the contamination. And the first batch I was made was ruined completely because of the mold they get. And after that, my professor introduced me a kind of a new material called PLA. PLA is a biodegradable plastic. First, I wanted to keep my project completely sustainable, and I don't want to use any plastic. But I found that PLA is a kind of biodegradable material that can decompose. So I try to use it as a mold. Although I had a lot of issue with that because the smooth surface of the molds couldn't handle the mycelium and it fall apart. But I was happy because I could shape my myceliums just like the shape that I wanted to resemble pigeon towers. I think what draws my attention to the pigeon towers is just the sustainability, but the story they tell about a way of life that really valued balance. The people who built these towers had such a deep understanding of their environment. They didn't see nature as something separate from their lives. They worked with it, and that's something we are lost a bit in today's world. This project is a small gesture, but I hope it sparks a conversation about how we can design in a way that honor both our culture and our planet. This project has been such a journey for me to my roots, to experiencing with living materials like mycelium. I am really happy to share it with you. Thank you.
Any questions? I'll pass the mic. All right.
I'll insert myself here, sorry. So first, I wanted to say that I'm very impressed with your structures, especially having been privy to your iterations throughout the class. They look pretty solid, which I don't know. I didn't personally work with mycelium, but I saw the struggles that the mycelium people went through. And I'm wondering, I'm sorry, I don't know what to call y'all. I'm wondering if you have any plans of how, it looks like you've mastered your process to the layman's eye, but I'm wondering if you have any plans in the future with how you're going to do this or what you're going to use this technique for. Yeah, that's mainly my question because I think it's pretty cool.
Working with mycelium is a kind of very, very challenging for me because it's a living material and you have no control over it. At first, I thought that it's very easy. I can make a mold and put it and shape it like whatever I want. But I found that I cannot control it at all, and the process it takes to grow and the environment that you should prepare for it to let it grow is a kind of challenging. So I should experiment more with this material and fully understand its nature and how I should research about it more and understand what it came from and how can I use it for the other projects.
Amazing, thank you. I see that we all share this first, the amateur's curse, where we go in thinking it's going to be super straightforward, and also this excitement once you start to get something to really see what you can do, because that's when like your mind starts going. So thanks for so much for answering my question. Thank you. I don't know. Oh.
I'm wondering what's the what's the percentage of mushroom in the final product once it's dry like that? Like, is it 100% mushroom? Is it still like a substrate or the growth material?
Actually, I wanted to put the mold inside it, put the mold that is inside out, to put it out. But when I cook it, it was too fragile and I couldn't be able to do that. But I try to put some of them out, as you can see, but the consistency of the mycelium was too fragile. And yes, it's all just mushroom and water. And for the base layer, I used some black soap and put the mycelium on that black soap, so it would help me to peel the PLA inside easily. But it's just mycelium, if I get your question right.
Yeah. So it's not like the food that's dry that's glued with the mushroom.
Oh no, just mycelium.
Because I haven't
itself.
been in the class.
Okay, yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's a nice quality to the texture of the actual pieces, echoing the actual tower also, which has this same, like it's like the material is from the ground and that's pretty much it, right? There's no metal structures in those pigeon towers. It's basically just the ground being built on top of itself. And I think there's a nice analogy also with the mycelium doing the same thing. And I was wondering if you've looked into doing more architectural pieces with the mycelium to do another echo to those types of pigeon towers. Like, like the nice grid-like structure also, or even like when you see the interior, there's this kaleidoscopic effect. So I would like to know if you've thought about that also, like doing this with the mycelium.
For using mycelium as another architectural piece?
Yeah,
no?
doing like we just saw, basically.
No, I don't think of that because actually this is the piece that I can find in Iran that actually has a sustainable approach. All the new things has built there are made out of stone, nothing that relate to sustainability. But I plan to use mycelium as kind of pods. That was my first idea, to to preserve trees in forests. And that's a great, I think the quality of mycelium is giving me this opportunity to have a design without harm to environment and the earth. Yes.
All right, thank you. When I said architectural, I didn't want to say like steel beams and all. I just wanted to say like something more thought of in the structure of it, like in itself. But that answers my questions also.
Okay, some parts maybe to yeah.
Building from what's available, basically.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I am interested to know about how we can cultivate these kinds of mushrooms and their roots. The process that they came from is very interesting for me. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for your project, Nilufar. I think, first of all, that's very interesting to learn more about Pigeon Tower, because this is not what we have in my country, for instance. I feel like the most interesting part of the project remains in the kind of form, shape finding, because there was a lot of challenges facing gravity with such materials. I don't think that this could be scaled up as it is, because gravity implies even more issues when you scale things up. And also there's another thing. So as like small objects, symbolistic objects experiments, I think it's actually very powerful also in terms of aesthetic. The question I had, it's a tricky question actually. I was waiting for like a month to ask you this question now. But since mycelium is organic matter, it's composed of not exactly mushroom, but mycelium itself, plus here there's sawdust and coffee grounds. Have you ever thought in your process that pigeons might actually be interested into fitting themselves with the architecture, which had an interesting layer of challenge, but also in terms of concepts and symbolism and an architecture that gets consumed by its inhabitants? I mean, did you thought of that in your process?
Yes, I was thought of that, but I don't. I think the pigeons wouldn't, when they are using them as a nest. I don't think they are eating them, or maybe after the process that it's going through, maybe the decaying process of the mycelium, when it's getting to the ground, I guess they are trying to eat out of them, but I don't think that they are going to harm their nests. When we actually built some pigeon tower with mycelium, I don't think they, do you think that they would harm their nests and eat out of it? But it's very interesting idea, yeah. I never thought it this way, but I don't think that they are, I should experiment about it, I don't know, but yes, maybe, I don't know, the pigeons are usually eat some grains, but I don't know mushrooms are good for them, or they trying to eat out of them, if I can answer your question. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Nilufar. Thank you also, everyone else, for this morning's presentations. I think we're going to take a break now, but we'll be back. So everyone joining us online, just hold up and we'll be back soon. Okay.
Serrano's organic, so yeah, it'll won't hurt you. It'll hurt you, but it won't kill you.
Hello?
I'll take it. Maybe stick the last one.
Oh, did I close it? No. I think it's fine. Okay. Is it ready? Is it like we're streaming? Hello, everyone. We're live. So, hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Maxime-Alexandre Gosselin, and I'm going to present you this work, which is, for now, titled Archival Wasteland. So, disclaimer, I'm not a designer, so I'm not putting in front of you a solution to a problem, or I'm not trying to explore how to, let's say, do something else with our e-waste, but in a way, yes. So the work goes like this. As the world escapes forward to the newest technologies and the way we consume them, which was a phenomenon that was apparent in Leah and Maria's work in the back, I cannot help but feel like our relation to how we record and consume our collective memory has shifted from a generational heritage to be passed on to something else, something less sustainable and that can hardly be decoded for the next generations. As we saw with floppy disks, CDs and DVDs, and as we're starting to see with hard drives, data on our phone and the digital clutter of all sorts, we're consuming our archival matter as something that is disposable and that we can throw away. Some of the memories migrate to newer technologies, while others get left behind. So these memories that we throw away, they're derived from their emotional value and contextuality. They become locked inside those tiny little boxes that we call hard drives, and they're stored away forever. They decay, they corrupt, and their digital materiality becomes a mess of one and zeros without the context to decode them. So to play with this idea, I hacked into those hard drives, which belongs to me and which once housed precious memories of mine, and I transformed them into piezoelectric devices which vibrate to act as speakers. So the electrical current from the hard drive comes out as sounds under the form of those little birds that you hear if you come closer. So as a second exercise also, I transformed data, so images, pictures, into sounds, and I reverted back those sounds into pictures again as a demonstration of how the nature of data is dependent on the way we decode it. Now, before I talk about the artwork itself in a more poetic way, I will also mention that I considered including how data centers, so the cloud, is now a new form of storage that houses our collective memory, about the fact that it does not belong to us, and about also how they extract those collective ideas and memories to feed their algorithms. How it has an impact on the power grid, how the hard drives are cooled in gigantic refrigerators underground. And I felt like that was another piece that would work within the same context, but this was not what it was about. Also, a quick statistics, 50% of our data is on the cloud, and it's growing, so it's surpassing the data we have physically. So, to come back, oh, and by the way, there's a lot of cybersecurity attacks also on data centers, so our collective memory is really jeopardized by that. Anyway, in the context of this piece, I rather wanted an emotional angle, which I represented in this diorama. As I lost a lot of precious memories to the failing materiality of storage media, I wanted to symbolize this by distorting bird songs leaving the hard drives. It's also a projection in a digital dark age, which is a concept that represents how future generations could potentially lose the ability to read or consult the current or past technologies. In this eventuality, our ability to record and maintain our knowledge base would get outpaced by the technological escape forward. In that world, the birds left, and the songs that remain became noise as we forgot how to listen to them. Thank you.
If somebody has a question, I can pass the mic.
Questions?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Sneaking up behind you. First of all, I want to say congrats on the work. Beautiful. I'm sure we all agree. Second, I was just wondering, I know that your number one issue up till now has been making, it is audible. You can hear it for those at home. I've heard it myself. I'm wondering if you are, I think you might need to stick a mic inside it, but I'm wondering if you have, outside the time constraints of obviously the 12-week class, if you're planning on trying to play with this more to see if you can make it louder, or I know you mentioned yesterday to me, and maybe you want to share with other people, some ideas you've had about boosting the sound quality or even just the sound itself, and I was wondering if you could share a bit about that.
Absolutely. I'm still discovering how to master the art of making sounds with hard drives. I realized that a bunch of high-pitched sound were not audible enough because the head of the hard drive would be way too erratic so that it would not record the vibrations. So that I discovered yesterday, basically. So I'm still finding ways to play with it. So yes, the question is, I do intend, the answer is, I do intend to continue to play with it, but also I'm gonna ask for a grant to get domes, because I also love the idea of making dioramas, and I think they're a powerful symbol of the way we want to record things and keep them in a state where we can observe them and like maintain them. But at the same time, I feel like we do not have the tools to do that with the current technologies we have. And yeah, I do intend to play with the sound, like the audibility of it, but is that a word? Anyway, but what? It is now. Yeah, okay, there you go. Neologism. So the thing is, I think there's also a poetic aspect to the fact that we can barely hear it also, and that I think makes the sound more precious because you need to really get intimate with the artwork to actually listen to it. So it's not like something that is inside going out. It's much rather you going inside the work to hear it. So I think there's a nice balance because, of course, for now it's very, very subtle. So in the context of this exhibition, it's very hard to hear. Adding a piezoelectric sensor inside to capture the sound also would be an idea. Time constraint is one of the factors, but also I wanted to keep the piece simple for now.
So when we were talking about your piece, I asked you whether the cloche that is covering it was problematic, and you were actually finessing the base of it so that it would allow more sound to escape. I wonder, now that you've done this project, like, how would you reapproach the project, knowing it's, you know?
I think two things are at play here with the dome. The fact that I need to lift it to hear it, but also the fact that it actually muffles the sound. So it absorbs completely since it's Pyrex, and I think it's a vacuum chamber. So I think this would be another type of affordance, not affordance, but of way of expressing this thing as something that would be muted by the actual dome. That was not exactly my goal, though. So the dome was more like a visual prop to represent this diorama. But now that I experience the fact that it actually absorbs the sound, it's giving me new ideas to and like to approach this idea of losing those memories or trying to keep them within a state that can be observed but maybe not interacted with. So yeah, it's something that I'm thinking about. Yeah, exactly. But I would need to play with it first so that it would make sense. I guess it's your turn.
You're waiting for me.
I'm waiting.
Is there anyone else? Thank you, Maxime-Alexandre. First of all, I think it looks very professional, very polished. This should require more work to be exhibited somewhere. I think you're like approaching a final prototype. That's very good. I feel like the story, the explanation were great. We actually don't need it. I feel like the piece speaks a lot for itself. And actually, there's something you didn't talk about, and I think it's great you didn't, because this is something we have to pay attention to. But the fact that things are moving into it is also super interesting. This kind of robotic agency from the hard drive that makes you observe an environment that looks stable and inert, and at the end there's like actually something going on. I don't know, when you go like to pet shops, I used to go when I was a kid, not anymore, but you know, you look in these cages and you're like, where's the mouse in there? You know, like there's a little bit, there's something where you want to discover what's inside, and at the end I would make the critique that we don't hear what's going on, but I think that it's interesting that actually you get closer to the dome instead of just putting big speakers and amplifying what's inside of it. So I think that's a nice approach to it, is to how would you make people get closer and closer, you know, without losing track that we're actually talking about archives. So I see that there's a tiny screen into it, and that would be actually great to have a visual interpretation of the code. You know, how do you encode, decode? I feel like there's like this kind of feedback exchange between what's on the hard drive, what it produces in terms of sound, in terms of movement, maybe in terms of visuals as well. But I don't really have a question, actually.
Well, thank you. Maybe a tiny detail I could talk about very quickly also is the image itself, which is a sonification of, I mean, I mentioned it, but re-saying it. It's a sonification of an image, which basically I data bent, basically. So it is playing also on the fact that once that data is like taking in this new shape, it's gone forever in its original shape, which was also the link to this whole idea of the hard drives decaying. So it's just a tiny detail, but yeah.
Thank you.
I was waiting for him.
Also, just a comment, I think it's very nice that it blends this aesthetic, like this dead aesthetic of making like taxidermia-driven like installation, those that you can see in like old life museum things, and I used to have those at my high school also. And these things you don't see, and then it's mixed. The taxidermia animal are replaced by modern technology, and then there's also this futuristic, like dystopian look towards the future. It's very like a nice blend, and I think great last-minute decisions.
Thank you.
Not really last minute,
Was
but
that
like
last minute?
it was a big like
last
process. Like you talked about it like with me for the whole thing, and it really like took form at the end. I think it's great.
Thank you.
No, I mean, I fully agree with you. There's actually something that we talked about with the project that's over there, waves of discards. But what would our heritage look like in a natural history museum in like 50 years? There's going to be plastic. There's going to be most likely electronics. So it's interesting to have this like reverse museum history.
It's reverse history.
So, thanks, Max. Like this, it looks really professional, as Bree said. The thing that strikes me, perhaps the thing that strikes me the most about this is, you know, as you have said, pointed out, is the contrast in this composition that you can see between, you know, what is dead and what is also dead and doing some other stuff. But do you see a possibility because that, some of the things that we discussed in class was material encounter, but these were encounter that is actually in real life. For example, in a natural space, in a park, in a river, in a jungle, where you can see certain piece of electronics that may be buried or float around. So my question is, do you imagine this existing outside of a diorama medium into, a place that's more enacted, somewhere that is more,
It's a good question. I think my mind is not there at the moment, but it is something to think about. Because yes, I would probably need to, since a diorama is a symbol, it's not rooted in the reality of the things, right? So it's not.
It's isolated. Yeah.
It's isolated. So it's not contextualizing the e-waste within what we see normally in the streets. But I would say that whenever you see e-waste in the street, because we see a bunch of them, right? Like TVs, computers, sometimes hard drive or USB keys. By the way, never put those USB keys in your computers. They're probably viruses. But it's true. It's a way to hack people. But in any case...
Sounds like you found out the hard way.
Yes. In any case, I would say that this material is not dead. It's littered, like it's littering the sidewalk, but it's not dead. It's just decontextualized. And yes, maybe, let's say in the context of a hard drive and of the archival storage media, yes, in some cases, our emotional charge of those archival media is not there anymore. And maybe the data is not there anymore, but the material is still there, and you can still make something out of it. So that's something I didn't talk about, but I mean briefly, with the fact that I'm using those hard drives as piezoelectric devices. But there's also this play about you can do whatever you want with the material you want, and you can do that with trash. So whenever you see trash, you can actually always take that back, reuse it, and recontextualize it. Even if it looks complex and it looks like something like you would not understand, there's always ways to show it within another space. So maybe that's a bit of a tangent to the question, because I'm not exactly sure how to answer it. But I would say that's my approach to doing something else than just a diorama.
Awesome. Thanks for answering.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Maybe, I guess I'll start. I'm Sarah Wiley. Hello. I'm a design student here at Concordia, and this is my project, which I've titled Embracing Objects, Embracing Us. This chair it looks a bit obscure right now. It might be not obvious as to why it looks this way, but I will explain that. But I first want to get into my motivation behind this project. So I'm primarily studying industrial design, and I'm interested in why people keep things. And I'm wondering if that can be a sustainable design strategy that we can apply into the designs themselves. Because I feel like as an industrial designer, you're just making things, and ultimately it's still going to be potentially ending up as waste, whether you like it or not. And so I was thinking about how can I make something that is made sustainably, yes, but also that people will be encouraged to keep and care for as long as possible to reduce the overconsumption of materials and products. And I wanted to understand how I can, as I said, imbue that into the design itself of an object. So there's already been some research done about why people keep things. A lot of the time, which makes sense, you can imagine, has to do with emotional connection. So, you have a memory attachment to something, but there's another layer there where potentially if you have an emotional connection to an object, you might keep it redundantly. And by that I mean, you might keep it and not actually use it and buy another thing that is the exact same thing and actually use that other thing. So when people keep things and it's not an emotional connection, there's still emotion attached to it, but they tend to keep it because of some pleasure that they get out of the object itself. And so I was wondering how I can kind of synthesize, synthetically create that kind of emotion in an object, even if you don't have any prior attachment to it. I'm wondering, can I kind of encourage that response? And so I wanted to make a chair. I didn't make the chair. I upholstered it, but I chose to focus on a chair because it's a classic industrial design object. It's one of the most designed things in the world, probably. And I specifically chose, this is a disposable plastic lawn chair, which you wouldn't think of as being personal at all. It's mass produced, they're made in molds, they're disposable. You've probably all sat in one. And so I thought it would be kind of an interesting challenge to try and reimagine it as a cherished object. Initially, my idea was to make a chair that had sensors in it to kind of create, to kind of take the data of the person that's using the chair, as in how they're sitting in it, and kind of give that back to them as a silly report, kind of like Spotify Wrapped, which just happened. So I wanted it to be super kind of irreverent and an astrological kind of reading of how you sit in the chair. The scope of that idea was not feasible for this semester, for this class. So I refocused my idea to be more about, okay, how can I maybe make an interaction between the user and the object that encourages this kind of connection? And I was inspired by numerous people, but one individual in particular was Fernando Lapos, who is a Mexican artist, and he makes one of his projects, I guess, is he's made various furniture pieces out of agave fibers, or upholstered with agave fibers. So there are these really interesting pieces of furniture like stools or benches that kind of just look like mops or a sheepdog, where it's just this mass of material and you're not really sure what it is. And then you can kind of, after interacting with the object, understand what's going on. And that's something I wanted to try and create here. So that's what led me to using these layers of fabric. Because first of all, I think it creates an interesting visual experience where you have to kind of come up to the chair, interact with it to understand what's going on and kind of relate to it. And then secondly, it also adds a personal element where you can engage with the materials you like. So I know someone in the room doesn't like corduroy. She can choose to not sit on the corduroy. I like the idea that you can come up here and move things around and kind of show off what you like, what maybe you don't like. And then on the other hand, you can also encase yourself in the chair, which I think was important to my idea that I wanted people to connect to the chair. And so I like the idea you can be kind of encased inside of it. So I'm going to ask Angelica if you want to come up here. We can demonstrate the chair. But yeah, you can add the layers over yourself. There's also a lovely footstool here provided by Fourth Space to add to the comfort. You could do whatever you want. The world is your oyster. But yeah, I wanted something where you could kind of empathize with the chair by literally being almost inside of it. And I have sat in it, and I would say it's quite cozy. It's quite comfortable, and it's good. I think I would be a good napping chair. Angela, if you don't mind, I'm gonna pull this over. These ones are a bit hard to pull over when you're sitting in the chair, but I made these kind of drapes to really feel like you're literally inside the chair and relaxing. So yeah, so the fabric is, I think 2/3 of the fabric is repurposed. So some of it's my own that I had left over from other projects. Some I sourced from secondhand stores, and a few of the textiles I bought new. And of course the chair it's actually not my chair, it's my neighbor's lawn chair, which I borrowed for this. But the upholstery, it's all tied onto the chair, so it can be removed. It's not attached physically to the chair in any irreparable way. So it's all removable. And yeah, I also like the idea of having these repurposed fabrics as another method of incorporating like memory into the chair itself. I could, envision someone like myself, I've already added in fabrics that I've used in the past, and like buying fabric secondhand makes me wonder, like, who used these before and where were they? Like there's some curtains in there. I think there's like a tablecloth. So it's just been interesting to see them all come together as a kind of larger experience, which I hope encourages some thinking and a moment of like relaxation, but also connection with the chair that's supporting you as you sit in it. You're loud. Yes, this is yes, the chair. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say. Yeah.
So I think it's very nice to have those different layers that gives like characterization to the chair, like different types of personalities, like from the left, from the right, from the back. Also, as I said, I think a Snuggie for your legs would be amazing. But I think there's something that popped into my mind. I'm thinking of like embroidery, and I think it would be maybe something to think about as, it kind of looks like a book, and maybe it's a way to tell stories also for those that went into the chair. So maybe there could be a way to leave your mark also on the chair to pass on others that would sit there. I don't know, it's just an idea, but I'm wondering if you thought of this idea of combining the different experience of people with the chair.
So actually I did. When I was ideating this whole process, this whole chair, I actually did consider making it out of paper, which I had in a previous class, some of my classmates had made an entire project, a bag out of paper, which I thought was really beautiful and like ephemeral. And I like the idea. Something I forgot to mention. I also enjoyed the thought that people would come up to the chair and kind of make their own like mark on it, whether that was by, moving the fabric around, or if I had done it out of paper, writing on it, leaving some effect. So it definitely crossed my mind. I just wasn't sure about the logistics of paper and where I would get it and how much I would need, and like I'm familiar with sewing, so that seemed like an accessible thing, and I knew I could also get materials secondhand, which was important to me because I, from like sustainability perspective, but also money because fabrics are expensive. But yeah, it did definitely cross my mind. That was my main motivation, was having people engage with the chair, leave a mark, have the chair kind of impact them as well.
Hi, so from an industrial design perspective, I enjoy this chair in a way that's, I think we usually understand a plastic chair in an outdoor context. In this context, it looks adapted to somewhere more indoors, some in certain places that are more intimate to us. And again, there's this kind of subtle and understated contrast. It's not extremely strong. It's not like it's very contrasted in a way that, you can sense that there's a plastic underneath, and then there's some fabric that's representative of intimacy on top of it. And I feel like that was choosing the materials of this chair. I know that you wanted to choose a plastic outdoor chair specifically for this project. And I know that there are other available alternatives in terms of materials, such as the bluer plastics, the ABS, and the so did you choose this specific gray stone-ish looking plastic for your?
I did not. It was literally just like my neighbor's chair, and I was like, hey, can I borrow that? And they said yes, and they happened to have a gray/brownish chair. I will say like I'm happy it ended up being a bit like this shape, this kind of deck chair shape, because it gave me more room to work with, and it also makes it quite comfortable as opposed to like the classic, like kind of tighter, like white plastic lawn chair. The only other thing I would add is I didn't want to completely cover up the chair. I wanted it to still look like recognizably like, oh, I know what's under there. It's a lawn chair, it's plastic. So that's why I chose not to. Initially, I had thoughts of like, maybe I'd try and put like a sleeve on the armrests or cover the legs up, but I ended up deciding not to do that because I wanted to still have the remnants of the chair underneath be visible. But no, the gray just kind of was there. It didn't really have a choice. The fabric, I tried, like the blue, I did pick this color because I thought it would nicely harmonize with the color of the chair. But yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I felt like the little details, such as the moments where you have these knots, they do make a lot of sense as well. In terms that we've probably seen those cushions that you can tie to the chairs in certain chairs that you see in like a living room or like a kitchen chair where you can tie these cushions to your seat.
Yeah, I had wanted to. I'm really interested in quilting. If I had all the time in the world, I would have quilted a component of this. I would have knitted a component of this. I would have embroidered probably as well. I love embroidery. I really like textile arts. But of course I was limited by time. But yeah, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh yeah, the quilting. Yeah, so this is like stuffed with a duvet that I also got secondhand, these cushiony pieces. Because I just wanted there to be volume in the chair because I thought it would look a bit sad if it wasn't like kind of puffed up and like covered in these layers of fabric. And yeah, I literally was like looking at I have like an IKEA kitchen table with chairs that have cushions like this on it. And I was just looking at that and I was like, that's what I want to do because it looks like a chair. And I just like the way it looks. So yeah.
Well done, thank you.
Hello, I'm the one who doesn't like corduroy, by the way, if anyone was wondering who this person is. So it's not that I don't
Here,
like
wait,
it.
I'll hide it for you. You have to look at it.
I think this is a really cool piece. I also think that it could be quite sellable for someone who lives in the country that loves to like sit by a fire during the fall, wants to be nice and cozy, or like a nice little dad nap. I think this is completely really interesting, and I think that you could actually sell this piece. Maybe you should think about it.
Thank you.
Maybe we can collaborate.
I would need like a team of minions to help me sew because you would think like sewing a bunch of rectangles wouldn't be that time consuming, but it really is. It takes a lot of time. There's a lot of work that went into this, which is another thing that I forgot to mention as well. But I was also interested in the like creator like user relationship. I'm like, how can I maybe encourage people to think about the designer and the people behind objects, like how they're made and who they're made by. So I hope maybe people could see this and be like, wow, it's a lot of fabric. Maybe there was a lot of work that went into that, and think about that. But thank you for your compliments. I will probably not be making another one of these. I think I'm going to need a break, but maybe in the future.
All right, thank you.
Sarah, your chair puts me into a big ontological problem because I feel like either you or the object has tricked us from the beginning because you haven't done a chair exactly, and I think that's what's interesting in this piece. And I was really figuring out this is not a chair. This is layers of nostalgia on top of an object that you sit on. And this could be adaptable to many things. And then at the end, I was thinking, this is a doppelganger, because I was thinking of this chair and then you moved it like this way. And I was seeing another chair and another layer of a chair and another and another and another. And I feel like there's like something about modularity in this object that's super interesting because you never see the same thing, and then you have someone sitting on it, and that's why I'm really not interested by this plastic, let's say, illusion here, because you could lie down into it. If it was on the floor, you put this on top of your sleeping bag and you go camping in the Laurentians and you're happy and everyone's gonna be like super, impressed by this object. So I feel like there's and it connects a lot with like many other objects about this kind of memory, nostalgia, all these fabrics that goes on top of each other. And I think that's a very interesting way of reconsidering the objects themselves. Designers, they like to think objects that we know. We need to stick to an idea. This is a chair. Otherwise, what could this be? And I feel like there's like this way of reimagining something, a new way of sitting, of like you said in your presentation, of merging with the objects we have. A question I have, since you've used different fabrics, I haven't tried it. I will, but I feel like there's something about haptics and touch. And have you thought of this because there's some materials we like to touch them, we like to have them. Some others, like wool, is hard to wear. It's scratching. Yeah, when your grandma makes you something and you're like it scratches. So have you thought about this very haptical impact? Because it's very visual, but I feel like there's something we haven't talked about is the fact that you can feel different layers, different material, different sensations.
Yeah, if I had if I had time and resources and energy, I really did want to like use different kinds of materials. Like when I was at the fabric store, I saw some ones that were like fuzzy, like fluffy, and I really wanted to use those. I couldn't make it work. So my compromise was the corduroy, also because it felt like very chair-y. But yeah, no, I definitely wanted to, that was definitely in my mind of having those different textures and materials. I love feeling things. I love texture. I love that variation. So it definitely was on my mind. And I think just inherently in all these like materials, you do have the option of like interacting with the ones you like and maybe kind of setting aside the ones you don't. But yeah, it was definitely in my brain.
Adding to what you just said, I think what's nice is that not everybody likes the same material. You kind of have like a way of like, okay, I want to sit in this today, or like me, I don't like the cozy blankets that the people have. Like I want cotton and itchy wool, and I think it's very nice for that also. Like like when you talked about like a chair that you play with and that gives back, and you give something, you can even leave it in a certain way, and like that's also an action that somebody else it's like sending a little message, like sit in this one, it's curated for you.
Yeah.
Maybe one last thing. I also feel like it's the perfect winter chair because it's layered.
Yeah. It's very, very cozy. It's very tempting to nap in it, I will say.
Yeah, the onion chair.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll invite everyone to sit at the table. I'm sure there's enough seats for everyone, I would hope. You have a couple more seats underneath over here if you'd like to join on sides. Oh, wow. Yeah, please. Yeah, someone was mentioning, I think it was you, Phoebe, they were like, this is kind of like the Last Supper. Yeah. We kind of feel like in a Last Supper setting. We won't eat the one in the center. Yeah, let's not eat this one. Are we missing some more? Okay. Yes, that'll be me. Oh, it's not. Okay. Everyone settled? Amazing. Okay. So, hello. My name is Angelica-Anne Serrano, and I'm introducing the pieces that you will find on either ends of the table. And the design collection, I decided to name it Whispers of an Untethered Soul. And the idea behind the production of this series of tableware was to kind of tie two ideas together. Initially, it was finding an alternative material base for disposable tableware, but I was also thinking on the idea of the stigma that is also found behind food waste, as it's always kind of immediately seen as an end means. And I wanted to kind of see it with a renewed perspective and kind of being a resource that can be reused in a different context and kind of reframe this idea of food waste. And so throughout my investigation and kind of testing these different molds, there's kind of a lot of pieces that you could see here, different iterations, different collections. It's a series of probably a month's worth of collecting things from my compost bin and kind of revising how I can use them. Some of them I ended up having to strain the inks and the color out of these compost items and then using them as inks. Others, I used the actual physical remains and kind of broke them down to add structure or texture, such as these ones over here with the onion skin. But there's also one that you can find in the spoons over here where I used crab shells. But the crab shells here, yeah, they kind of look a little bit like either like ceramics or a mix of a different material, but I had to break them down because they would also react. That was also a challenge with gelatin, is how some items can react and break down the gelatin, so I had to counter that a little bit. In the context of the crab shells, I had to break down the protein before being able to integrate them in, so they were kind of in a little bath of vinegar for a couple of days, and that made a very unpleasant smell in the kitchen. But overall, after the dry down, they do create some very solid plastic. So some are actually quite successful, others not as much, but it's okay. And it did create a couple of challenges as well with the warping, as you probably might notice with the plates over there. But the overall approach was that with the disposable tableware, they would also find a space where they can also safely return to the grounds. As we know, with most disposable pieces as we have over here, they kind of end up in spaces where they can no longer be used. They end up in microplastics, they end up in spaces where they cannot have a second life to it. And I wanted to at least find a way where even if they don't end up in another space where they can't be reused, they can at least return safely to the soils. And yeah, so that's the premise of what we have here today. Also, a lot of these have been made with different dry times. Some have been for over a month, others for a couple of weeks. And of course, that can also affect the size of certain items, which makes them very Polly Pocket, tiny size, which is very cute at times. But also could have an interesting approach. I remember because you were mentioning how like rehydrating things could also be an interesting approach to bioplastics and having to them expand into bigger sizes, which I think would be a continued part of my research, just because one of the main things I've encountered throughout my research was that bioplastic is also water-based. So having that interaction as tableware can have its own issues because water-based things will affect the plastic over time, and that might not be what we want mixed with our food. Just a food for thought. Yeah, so I think this would be a continued project. This is not limited to what I have now. Of course, due to time restraints, I was still very happy that I was able to produce a series of items that I could be happy with how they turned out. But I think there's a lot of potential on how this can expand further.
Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions? Or should we do both?
because I feel like it would be very frustrating not to be able to talk.
If you have a question or something to say, please speak into the microphone that's being handed to you. Thank you.
Hello. No, I was wondering whether you want to present now or because I feel like personally that's your choice, but I feel like it's super frustrating that we talk about the bioplastic without talking about the setup. What would you think about this?
Yeah. So it's like a half and half.
And then we
position.
can point questions afterwards. What do you think?
Angelica, you may take my place. Hi, everyone. My name is Ming Firon, and I am a Master of Design student and focusing on communication design. And so I decided to take this course because my practice has largely been about storytelling and less about creating actual objects. And because the class has a focus on sustainability and biomaterials, I started thinking, how can I tell stories about health and nutrition in an interesting way? I plan for my master's thesis to be about health and nutrition, and it's just a subject that I'm personally very invested in. I moved to Montreal for this program 3 months ago, and it's the first time that I ever composted in a formal way. I'm American, that's not really something that we do. And so I noticed in the practice of falling in love with composting actually that when I would cut things up on the cutting board, there would be lots of beautiful, maybe unusable things, and I realized I wanted to encapsulate the beauty of these discarded materials into sculpture. I was also really inspired by the practice of paperweight making, which paperweights are really interesting because they're something that have been made for centuries, and the practice of entombing an object is a very sort of transformative thing that changes the object from whatever function it previously had into just simply an object of display. But in the practice of creating an object for display, you're sort of giving it a new hallowed status that it didn't have before. And so from a purely practical perspective, I wanted to work with a material that was just fully non-toxic. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a sculptor. The one time I took a sculpting course, I was basically just inhaling plaster the whole semester and feeling very ill. So I wanted to work with materials where I could safely breathe and then also know that I could safely return the sculptures to the earth without hurting it. So I did a series of experiments with different kinds of materials, including agar and gelatin. I decided that gelatin was an easier medium to work with on a larger scale. I had a lot of trouble getting the agar to actually set in larger contexts, and it was very much my goal to end up with a at least 9-inch sculpture so that I could house this pineapple core in it. And so she's a little wobbly, you know, but after a lot of prototyping, I realized that I was developing an emotional relationship with these scraps of food that were taking up 50% of my fridge. 50% of it had edible food, and then 50% of it was just food waste that I thought was very beautiful. So I guess the main takeaway from this practice is that the fact that these materials are ephemeral, it kind of heightens my emotional connection to them because I'm meant to enjoy them now. And I feel like I was their caretaker for the past few weeks. When my brother came to visit, he opened the front door and there were just jellies everywhere because I had been prototyping, trying to figure out like what looked the best and what combination of glycerin and gelatin would allow the jellies to sit at room temperature without molding too quickly, which definitely was a problem when the ratio of gelatin was like very high and there was almost no glycerin. So after a lot of trial and error and a lot of creative ways of molding things, I finally made this sculpture using cucumber, a pineapple top, and then because it's winter, there are a lot of beautiful mandarin oranges, and as I was eating them, I would peel them in a way where I would maintain the shape. And so it's the peel only, there's no orange inside. Funnily, with these like green onions, I thought that they were just totally TKO'd. Like they were sort of starting to rot in my fridge, so I put them aside, and they've started regenerating in the Jell-O, which is really kind of fantastic. So I just wanted to thank everybody today for being here and to give you a little offering in the form of a little agar jelly. These are vegan for anybody who has a dietary restriction. And I just thought this would be a nice moment for all of us to come together and just appreciate the work we've done as a class. And I just want to thank you for this experience and for everyone at Fourth Space once again for allowing us to have this moment together and to sit in front of this glorious video backdrop of trash and nature that I thought would elevate the whole experience. Thank you.
Hello, we're in business. I think this is a question that extends to both projects, as I'm sure a lot of questions that are coming up about this will be. I also worked with gelatin, and you mentioned that it is water-based, which I know. And it does bring a lot of challenges. Like, it loves to dissolve, it loves to break down under heat of even lights and fingertips. And I was surprised when working with it just how long it takes for things to set. I think for me, it takes like 36 hours to get any image off that. And I'm wondering, just for each of you, kind of if you could walk us through like the time frame it takes to make one of these pieces, because I think a lot of people don't understand how long it takes.
Would you like to go first? Sure. Okay, so yes, when it comes to gelatin, time is definitely something that you will need, because depending on the ratios that you're using, but also what is involved that you're combining it with can definitely affect the dry time. As I mentioned before, for some of them, acid does actually really help in speeding up that process. But at the same time, it doesn't really speed it up that much. You could say it at least takes like a minimum. I'm gonna say at least 48 hours to get something somewhat solid. So, yeah, no, it does take quite a lot of time. I think the only ones where it took maybe less is the ones that I mentioned with the crab shells. But also crab shells, to be fair, they also have their own form of. Oh my goodness, what's it called? I forgot already the term. But it works the same way as gelatin actually in the components. So it does help in structuring it. But it also has the risk of having to be more susceptible to creating molds. There's that as well to take into account. The more gelatin that you integrate, the more higher chances that it's gonna be molding over time. It is a very sensitive material. So yeah, it is a very tricky thing. Although I feel that it could be further investigated to see if that is a possibility to counter. Who knows, maybe we can make it dry faster.
In terms of making jelly sculptures, really scale is the huge factor here for how long it takes. So these little guys, I feel like popped them in the freezer for 15 to 20 minutes and they were ready to go. Larger ones, more like 30 to 40 minutes. It's one of those things where you have to keep an eye on it because you're submerging objects into it. And so about 15 minutes into it cooling, it has to be still pliable enough that you can navigate an orange peel through it and still like shape it so that it actually maintains a spherical shape. The larger sculpture, I made the base actually like weeks ago. That probably took, I would say like maybe in total, because I layered the cucumbers through it, the whole process probably took me about an hour and a half to make. There was a lot of volume actually of liquid in this 8-inch pie plate that I used. And then in terms of this top part, this actually took almost 2 to 3 hours to set. And at one point when I filled it up, I realized that it was I had let it go for too long. So I had to melt it back down halfway through the process in order to be able to put the pineapple core in. And then I also had to sort of set up a rig with chopsticks to get it to perfectly not like jut out to the top too much. But yeah, I would say a little more than 2 hours for it to set. Yeah. Less time than Angelica.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I think I have the sweet spot here because I'm in the middle and I have the presenters and the video and everything. And I find actually that it's a very interesting common project in a way because you're talking about sculptures, you're talking more about experimentations, and then you were able to put all of this together in a setup that reminds me a lot about old paintings, like where in this exhibition we're traveling through time, and there's something about this nature morte kind of painting where there's something really additional into it. And I'm wondering, I don't know if anyone is a painter around the table, but I'm sure they would be super interested because it's a very beautiful composition where you actually ask yourself, is this real? Is this a real fruit? I'm wondering, I know these are real, but at some point I was like, maybe some of them are fake, you know? So yeah, it's like it's fooling us. Why are these spoons so tiny? Why is this one bending this way? You know, there's something like super absurd about the composition, and I think that what's strong, because I don't think you've met before the exhibition to set this up, and I think this is really good, actually, as a common piece that comes from two very, very different directions. So my question would be, how did you manage to put all this together, and how did you agree on spreading the different elements on the table? How did you think about composition? Because it's hard to make composition, and the objects are actually communicating quite well, but they're also super different.
Well, I just want to go ahead and compliment Angelica because she did a presentation that was probably more beautifully designed than almost anything I've ever made in a 10-year career. And so when she came up to me after I explained my project concept and said, you know, there would be synergy between our projects, I completely trusted her taste and her point of view. Plus the prototypes that she'd brought in were so organic looking, and they reminded me of like amber, and I had noticed with my gelatin and glycerin experiments, they were like in terms of tone and colorway, like everything was just sort of already in harmony. Her work is very organic feeling, which I think is what makes it so appealing, and it just seemed to match the tone of what I was doing really well.
No, first of all, thank you. But also thank you because I feel like when we first encountered each other's project, that wasn't like the first thing that came to mind. But then at the same time, I think when we had first discussed having to kind of collaborate on making this gigantic table, I realized you were also thinking on the idea of like how encasing something that is often viewed as grotesque and kind of finding the beauty in that. And I think that kind of became like the foundation of that at the end of the day. Surprisingly enough, actually, the composition, I was surrounding it based on your work. And I thought that was my inspiration, having to kind of use that to frame your work in a way. So it kind of works in collaboration with the pieces that you've made. And I think they were very inspiring to me and how the layout actually turned out overall. But yeah, no, I think it was a great little marriage between the two projects.
Well, thank you for this nice piece. I was wondering, first of all, if you could talk, for Ming, if you could talk a bit about the video behind you, just for the inspiration that you had for the video and how it relates to this table piece. But also, I just wanted to say that the two projects really fit well together, not only like with the tonality of the project, but also with what they're conveying with time. Again, I'm like obsessed with time, but it's really nice how like you are on a like longer time frame or scale or whatever, and you're on a shorter time scale, but they're both conveying the same thing about trying to preserve something. Like when you said the amber, things encased in amber, like that's exactly what I thought when I saw the actual table. So I think it's really nice. But yeah, I want to hear about the video behind you.
Yeah, so during the class, I gave a presentation on landfills, and in doing the research for this presentation, I looked at a lot of imagery of trash and landfills and was just sort of flabbergasted by how much of it there was. And I thought, well, if we are going to be making this long tablescape, Fourth Space graciously said I could avail myself of this enormous screen and make a backdrop to go with what we were making. But I thought it would be interesting to make a video that kind of complemented everybody's work. The point is that in the landfill paper that I presented, it made mention of indigenous practices where it's important not to hide the trash that we make, and instead to sort of embrace it for what it is. And in my opinion, goes with the theme of what I'm trying to do, which is find beauty in things that we reflexively discard or cast away. And so to your point earlier about how many digital files there are out there in the world, every single bit of footage that I found is open source. And it was only like the tip of the iceberg. I think I found like 50 or 60 videos that would have worked. And I just stitched them together because I had a theme of trash and then I had a theme of nature. And I thought, how can these two themes work together and be paired together at the same time so it feels as if this waste facility treatment plant for the water is actually just as glorious as this waterfall. The mountains, or like the sort of picturesque mountain backdrop is complemented by the mountain of trash with pigs rooting through it, or like the beautiful butterfly is just flapping its wings, and then at the same time there are these flies going at it right next to it, just reminding us, yeah, exactly. It's reminding us that like beauty is completely subjective and that we should re-examine what our definitions are. And then that was sort of the point of my exhibition, and to turn trash into treasure, essentially. Thank you.
Yo. Yeah, I come from a kitchen background, cuisine background, and I'm almost like surprised that nobody mentioned like the aspic culture. Like that's the first thing I was, oh, look at these aspic, and I thought one thing that's very interesting also is that the gelatin was such a high class element of cuisine. It was so hard to extract from the animals, and it was served to rich people, and then the Jello came and changed everything, and then it became a whole craze. Yeah. And now you got this whole like reimagining of aspic as almost like more permanent sculptures with unedible like material or almost unedible material. I think with the glycerin, maybe it's unedible. So I'm wondering what you...
I wouldn't eat it, but like I keep saying, it probably won't kill you. You know, it'll just make you feel really ill. Actually, I had several inspirations. One of it was like the sort of culinary traditions of making jelly. It's in every culture. I have Chinese heritage, and a snack that we always had were these like little lychee jellies that you would pull the top off and, you know, suck the jelly out. And another like inspiration too was this artist named Serrano Franklin, who makes these large format jellies. But she has debilitating chronic autoimmune problems, and the gelatin is actually symbolic of the decay of her own body. So there are a lot of artists who are already working with gelatin as a form of like subversion, but also jelly as art in culinary contexts is, I mean, it's one of the most aesthetic, pleasurable things to look at, especially when you look at all these like mid-century advertisements of like the Jell-O ring with like all the food, you know, beautifully, exactly layered. And so it is an homage to that sort of meticulous arrangement. And these works in general are sort of like an homage to anybody who works in a culinary context and creates this painstaking, I would say, edible sculpture. Like you see Great British Bake Off, and they're making these insane sculptures out of sugar and flour and stuff, and then the judges just cut into it and destroy it, you know, hours of work. But that's what makes it so special. Yeah, so I love that you brought that point up.
Thanks. You know.
Anybody has last questions, comments before we wrap things up?
Yes, thank you, and please avail yourselves of these jellies. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank everyone for both days, for just letting us have a secret inside close look into all your projects. Just to let you know, we're going to be closing up the Zoom and the live stream now. This remains available on our YouTube channel if you'd like to return. Visit and share it there. Okay, thanks everyone. Have a great afternoon.